Chapter 1. This Very Spot. Explorer Retracings, Whitefella Dreamings. Dayton Duncan. We are on the western edge of the supernatural White Cliffs area, a stretch of the river bordered by eerie and magnificent white sandstone and dark igneous rock formations that have fascinated travelers and challenged writers' descriptive powers since the day Lewis emerged from them on May 31st, 1805, and sat down at the very spot we are now camped to try to paint the scenery with words for the first time. Kieran Kelly. I stood on the same spot as Gregory had done 143 years ago and tried to imagine how he must have felt, being the first European to see this grand panorama. In these passages from the American journalist Dayton Duncan and the Australian adventurer Kieran Kelly, we note the recounting of a similar experience. Both were retracing the journeys of their nation's explorers. In Duncan's case, Lewis and Clark, and in Kelly's case, Augustus Gregory. And each man found himself especially excited when he could claim to be standing at the very spot where these explorers themselves had stood. Such spots, for Duncan, for Kelly, and for similar retracers of the explorers, become numinous. Time seems to dissolve as each man imagines himself transported back to that foundational moment. What must it have been like to have been here then, they wonder. Each man seeks to sanctify the location as a sort of sacred site, transcending time, not just for himself, but for his settler nation. And, as I will argue, each uses the experience to express a settler colonial imaginary of place, providing sanction to a settler claiming and belonging. In Out West, Duncan explains that his purpose was to compare what Lewis and Clark encountered so many years ago with what I saw and what I experienced. To understand the full meaning of the Lewis and Clark journey, he explains, requires discussing what has happened in America from the time the first explorers pushed up the Missouri River toward the Western Ocean in a keelboat and canoes to the present, when I could travel the same route in the relative comfort of a Volkswagen camper. Duncan describes what he understands to be the meaning of the Lewis and Clark expedition in fairly conventional settler colonial terms, largely ignoring the presence of the indigenous residents and emphasizing newness, the future, and the perception of the land primarily as an unformed potentiality that will be brought to fruition by the settlers who would follow. As the first Americans to travel this new part of America, he declares, Lewis and Clark led, in effect, a journey into the future. The vast expanse they would explore was unknown, unformed, and virtually untouched by white civilization. It was a potential, a slab of clay to be worked and formed by American hands. This celebration of the idea that white settler societies have an opportunity to create a new future on ethnically cleansed indigenous lands is perhaps the foundational concept of the settler colonial imaginary. Without such a belief in the inevitable future of a white civilization, the entire settler project falters. Hence Duncan's framing of the Lewis and Clark expedition as a journey not into a land long settled by indigenous people, which was surely obvious to them as well as to him, but into a future that would be fashioned entirely by the desires and with the agency of white settler society.